What's the scariest true story that ever happened to you and still freaks you out? Story 1. When I was younger, my grandma and I liked to go to this little frou-frou tea shop that was about 40 miles from our home. It was a cute little place where you could get the classic tea and sandwiches and cute little desserts and all. One time we went, all was normal, but on the way home we received a call that my other grandma had passed away. Very sad, but as she had been battling cancer, not exactly unexpected. The next time we went, a few months later, on the way home, we received a call that my uncle had passed away suddenly from a heart problem. Creepy coincidence for sure, but we still did not think too much of it at the time. We went back a third time a few months after that, and for the third time on the way home, we received the phone call that someone had passed away. This time it was my grandpa's brother. We never went back to that tea shop again. Now all of these people were elderly and not exactly in the best of health, so them passing away around the same time was not exactly creepy. But the fact that 3 separate times that we went to this place, 3 people passed away the same day, and we received the calls on the way home, makes me think something about that place was somehow cursed. It has since closed, but I am still nervous to even go to that area to this day. Story 2. I used to have a tendency for wandering around abandoned buildings when I was in high school. One time a friend and I decided it would be a good idea to explore a farmstead that had not been in use for years. The whole experience was really bizarre. The farmstead was accessible by a long gravel road that brought you to a cluster of worn-down buildings around a central barn. We parked at the end of the gravel road near the turnoff to the main road so we could walk around the property and just pull out quickly later. We went into the barn first, and there were deer bones arranged in a circle around the skull, and a bunch of blankets and wood stacked in a corner of the room. We thought it was really cult-like and weird, noped out, and started walking back to the car. Halfway down the gravel road, we heard crunching, heavy footsteps, and someone screeching behind us. Blood-curdling, screeching. We sprinted back to my car and tried to get out of there as fast as possible, but it had snowed the night prior, and my back tire was stuck in a puddle of melted snow. My friend was screaming because she was so freaked out, but would not turn to look at the path behind us. By the time I had gotten the car unstuck, she turned around to see if there was someone following us, and there was no one there. It could have been a bird or something, but we both swear up and down to this day that someone was following us. I actually thought I was going to lose my life that day. Story 3. So this is going on as we speak, but let us take you back a couple of months to when this all started. One nice warm day, end of August, early September, I go outside and find this little ball of fur, feathers, hair, and a dangling earring hooked on my porch. Weird, I thought. I brought it up to my husband and said that there was some weird energy on our porch, and it freaked me out. I was not touching it, but it needed to go. He suggested that it was a nice gift from the tomcat next door, or something that our dog dragged home. My dog has never done that before, but hey, a way more logical reason than someone leaving weird energy on our porch. Cool. Then last week, this fully intact lower jawbone of a white-tailed deer shows up on our porch in the exact same place as where the hair feather furball was placed. Again, I asked my husband about it, and he says that the dog must have brought it with him. Again, something that he has never done but logical. I still was not going to touch it. The weird fur feather earring ball was still fresh in my mind, and if someone was leaving weird energy on the porch, I was not going to touch it. Thanks for taking that danger on, hun. It stayed on the porch for a while. Yesterday, I was studying, facing my front door. Around lunchtime, my dog starts freaking out, and I look up, and there is this older, disheveled-looking lady, I think, on our porch, who I had never seen before, walking toward our front door. She leaves something on the bench we have out there and turns around and walks away. After a beat, I get up to grab whatever pamphlet she left on our porch, except she did not leave a pamphlet. She came onto our porch, took the lower jawbone and moved it onto the bench, right in the middle of 2 posts of the porch fence, right in line with a bright ray of sunshine. So now I am pretty convinced that there is someone leaving weird energy on our porch, and here is hoping we are not cursed. Story 4. So as a youngster, me and my brother were staying up late playing video games since we did not have school the next morning. It was maybe 3 a.m. when we decided to shut it down and get in bed. My room is at the end of the hall while my brother's was right next to mine. After we shut it off and put the controllers away, we both hear these heavy, slow footsteps coming from the kitchen. The kitchen was the only room without carpet, so they sounded pretty ominous. We gave each other a look, and I called out down the hall, "Dad." Well, then the footstep sounds trailed back towards our laundry room and stopped. That is also where our basement door is. Well, we knew something was not right, so we both start yelling for our mom and dad, and they come rushing to us all sleepy and confused. And we frantically explain what we heard. My dad goes and checks it out and tells us that all the doors are still locked and closed and there was not anything showing anyone was in the house. Plausible explanation could be that it was just someone who broke in and scurried off when we called out. But I always wondered, what if it was some sort of ghost instead? Story 5. A few years back, I lived with my mother and German Shepherd in a 2-bedroom rented townhome. I got home from work one day and went about my daily routine. When it came time to eat dinner, I knocked on my mom's door to come and eat. I smelled cigarette smoke and heard her grunt a response. So I went back down and ate alone. I figured I would just put a plate away for her. Fast forward to about 2 a.m., I am awoken by someone holding my hand and gently shaking it. I immediately shoot straight up and look around. My dog, who is overly protective and sleeps with me every single night, is not in bed. She's not even in the room. She most definitely was on my bed when I went to sleep. I sleep with the bedroom door shut and locked. She is scratching at my closed and locked bedroom door from the hallway, frantic. I bolt for the door, let her in, and she is searching the whole room. I am now yelling for my mother. No answer. I forced my dog to walk down the hallway with me. I still smell cigarette smoke. I bang on my mom's door. No answer. So I just open it. She is not even home. The bed is made and her television is off. My dog and I search the whole entire house. Nothing is out of place. All the doors and windows are still locked. I was freaked out, to say the least. The next day I called my mom, and she told me she left early the day before to go visit my sick grandfather. Story 6. Moved into a cottage on the mountain. My backyard was a tree line. The moon lit everything so beautifully well it hardly seemed like night at all. I began having recurring dreams. It was the same dream every single time. In my dream, I would see myself laying asleep in my bed, and then it switched from third-person view to first-person view. In the dream, I awoke to a whispering female voice. The thirst hit me. In the dream, it was unbearable. I would climb out of bed, open the French doors, and head to the kitchen sink to get a glass of water. As I neared the sink, the voice would get louder and louder, but I still could not make it out. It was as if it were a foreign language, but not one that I had heard before, nor since. Then standing in my kitchen and looking out the window, right above the sink to the tree line in my backyard, well lit by the moon's light, the voice suddenly became clear. She said, "The devil is in the woods." At this point, a shadow darted quickly behind the tree line. I would then wake up from my dream standing in my kitchen in the exact spot that I was in the dream. This happened almost every week for the entire duration of time that I lived in that house. It also always happened close to or right at 3 a.m. Story 7. This one is kind of creepy, but also kind of comforting. This story was told to me by my grandmother, who is a no-nonsense kind of broad, so I believe every word of it. My grandma had a neighbor friend who unfortunately lost her husband when she was young, about 40 or so years ago. It was a sudden passing, cardiac arrest or something like that. So this woman was so upset because for a couple of years after his passing, she could not dream of her husband. For some reason, it really bothered her that she could not experience a dream with him in it. It is almost like she wanted it for the comfort. Anyway, some time passes, and this woman is preparing to sell her house and move closer to her kids they lived a state over. Suddenly, she gets her wish. She starts dreaming, and her husband is in them. She has multiple of these dreams, and in every one, her husband wakes her up, sits down on the bed, and starts speaking to her. However, his speech horrifies her. It was described to me as backwards or garbled. I imagine it to be something similar to the way Twin Peaks characters speak in the Black Lodge. So yeah, pretty creepy. She cannot make a single word out. A few days before she is about to move out for good, she goes to bed and dreams of him again. The dream is the same, except she understands one word he says. He grabs her in the dream and repeatedly says rafters, almost seeming panicked. She wakes up rattled, but returns to sleep. The next day, as she is finishing up packing in the basement, she looks up and sees the rafters. She remembers the dream and is compelled to reach into them. She does and pulls out thousands of dollars worth of World War II bonds her husband had purchased without her knowledge. She swears he never told her about them, so he appeared in her dream to tell her so she would not leave all those bonds behind when she sold the house. Story still gives me chills today. Story 8. Before my parents split up, we used to live in this huge old house. We lived in that old leaky house until I was about 14. The thought was to renovate the nearly 100-year-old house, but I guess life got in the way for my parents. The house had 2 floors and all of our bedrooms were up on the second floor. The largest part of the second floor was dominated by the attic. It was a creepy attic filled with discarded things from both our family and the previous owners. I knew the attic pretty well because although I was terrified of it, me and my best friend would hide things we should not have there. A stolen baseball bat, fireworks, and other things 10 to 14-year-olds would hide from their parents. The attic had an old wooden door that had a key in it. The door was always locked unless someone was in there. My bedroom shared a wall with this attic. I had insomnia when I was a kid, or at least the doctors told my parents it was insomnia. One of my biggest secrets is that I slept with a nightlight on, hiding under the covers and pillows until I was 14. I would strategize how I would sleep and make it look like the bed was empty by sleeping under the mattress or by having my head under the pillows. The reason was that almost every night I would hear stuff from the attic shift and move. It often sounded like somebody was rolling heavy balls like bowling balls or the like across the floor in the attic. Sometimes I would hear knocks on the walls. Sometimes I heard what sounded like whispers. Me and my best friend would sometimes summon the courage to explore the attic in the daytime. Always with the door open, never alone. I was obsessed with finding the balls I heard rolling across the floor. The other sounds I could write off as sounds a house would make, but the rolling balls and the whispers were unexplained. We never found the rolling balls or any other source that could explain it. I am sure there could be a plausible explanation, but I never found one. I do not believe in the supernatural, but for some reason I still get scared thinking about it. We moved when I was 14, and the first night after we moved, I slept with all the lights off, head on the pillow. I have slept well since. I spoke with my mother about these things a couple of years ago. When I told her about the sounds, she grew a fearful expression and said she did not want to talk about it anymore. Story 9. When I was 12, my family lived in a house that had a very large pond behind it. Think less of a pond and more of a very small lake. So when we first moved to this house, the neighbor's son was always out at the pond fishing. When I would talk to him, he would swear that there was an absolutely huge catfish in the pond. He really wanted to catch it, but was never able to. He said he knew that it was there because he had seen it eat some of the baby ducks and geese that lived there. He watched them get pulled down under the water while swimming on the surface. I thought it was interesting that a fish could eat baby ducks, but never really gave it a second thought. Neighbor's son eventually moved out. He never did catch the catfish. After living there a few years, I was probably around 16, I finally saw what my neighbor's son was fishing for, or at least saw its effects. My friend was spending the night just hanging out playing video games all night on some random weekend when we heard the ducks on the pond completely losing their minds. This was around midnight, and normally we did not hear the ducks inside, so we had to see what was going on. At first, we did not notice anything. It just seemed like the ducks were going crazy every once in a while for no reason. Around 10 to 20, we had a lot of ducks and geese on this pond one day. My dad counted like 300 would fly off the pond for a little while and then come back down, the whole time freaking out. Then we noticed it. Ducks were being pulled under. We watched as several ducks were pulled under the surface by something, and all the ducks around it would flip out and move away from that spot. It was intense. I have seen ducks dive for food before, and this was not that. They would kind of struggle as they were being pulled down, throwing their wings and head up as they went down. It seemed like something was grabbing their legs and pulling them down. And let me clarify, these were not baby ducks. These were full-grown adult ducks being pulled under and not resurfacing. Next day, we told everyone, and very few people believed us, as these things usually go. Never really saw anything like it again and had stopped thinking about it until one night something happened. Cool summer night, window open. playing a game on my Nintendo SP when I heard something outside. It sounded like someone with big sloshy, wet boots was stomping through mud. I was sitting on my bed next to the window looking at my SPE when I first heard the sound. It sounded like whatever it was walking down the fence line to the pond. I jumped off my bed to go look out the window. When I looked out, I saw what I can barely describe. At the end of our fence, about 20 feet away from the pond, was this giant brown and black mass of something. The size of it was around a small car, and it was rounded kind of like Cousin It, with two shiny black eyes near the top. It was looking right at me. As soon as my eyes met its, I collapsed with fear. I have never felt anything near that level of fear before in my life. One time I almost got seriously hurt from car surfing, and the fear I felt then was a drop in a bucket to what I felt when my eyes looked into whatever it was. I laid there on the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe, and listened to the creature walk to the pond. I heard splashing, and that was it. I laid there for what seemed like hours and eventually moved to my bed and stayed awake in fear all night. Just stared at the window. No idea what it was. I think about it often. Story 10. About 4 years ago, we heard my grandmother fell and hit her head, and she was not going to make it. We drove 4 hours south to get to see her one last time. My mom was distraught. She was riding back with some other family. My sister had to drive us home. We were pulled off on the side of the road. I cannot remember what we were doing over there, but we were waiting for cars to pass so we could hang a U-turn. I turn around and look and see a car approaching. My sister then says, "I am going to hit this car." I thought she was messing around or something. Then as the car starts to pass us, my sister hits the gas and swerves into it. Amazingly, we did not actually hit it. That other driver had incredible reflexes and swerved around us, did not even honk or stop. My sister instantly started to freak out and said she did not see it. I was confused. I told her what she told me, but she had no memory of saying that. She then burst into tears, saying she did not see it and she did not say that. But my brother in the back seat confirms we both heard her say it. To this day, we do not know what happened. She still claims she did not say that or see the car. Story 11. One time I drove back to college after Christmas, but before the winter break was over, so I was the first of my roommates to get back to the house we were renting. Our house was in a pretty isolated spot on the outskirts of a town in upstate New York. I pulled into the driveway behind the house, went to the trunk and grabbed one of my bags, and then ran inside because I had to use the bathroom so badly. I had been on the road for over 5 hours. I was inside the house using the bathroom for maybe 5 minutes. Afterwards, I went back outside to get the rest of my stuff from the car, and there were footprints in the snow all around it. Now, as I said, I was alone in the middle of nowhere. The only set of footprints should have been mine from where I had gotten out of the car on the driver's side, walked to the trunk, and then walked to the back door. Yet now there was another set of footprints circling the car and then leading into the woods at the back of the property. It appeared that the footprints had originally come from the woods as well. I had left my trunk open when I was inside because I had assumed I was alone and nothing had been taken. But someone had seen me arrive, come out of the woods, circled my car, and returned to the woods. I grabbed the rest of my things, locked my car, ran into the house, and locked the doors. Story 12. When I was 8 years old, my room was on the second floor of our house with the window facing the street. I liked that room because there was a street light right outside that made the whole room glow, a pleasant orange color at night, and I was and still am terrified of the dark. One night I had stayed up reading. I had just discovered Percy Jackson, and I heard a rustling sound. At first I rationalized it was my cat, but she was asleep in the hall right outside my doorway. I realized it was coming from outside. I was terrified, but I could not check. So I slowly sat up in my bed, rose up onto my knees, and peeked out the window. There was a man in the flower bed crouched in the lavender bush. He was wearing an old black hoodie and jeans, and his hands were so pale they glowed in the combined lamp and moonlight. I was so scared but mostly puzzled because if someone was going to enter our house, I would think they would go to the backyard where there is no light at all, not the front yard below the open window of a lit room. And plus, he was facing away from the house as if he was watching the street for something. I ducked back into bed and covered my head with the blankets. He returned every night for the next 12 days, always crouching in the lavender bush in the full glow of the streetlight. I do not remember why I did not tell my parents. On the 13th night, as I watched him, he suddenly froze. He had been still before, but somehow he completely stopped moving, as if he were made of concrete. He slowly stood up, and he was tall. So tall. My bedroom window is at least 15 feet above the ground, and the top of his head almost reached the sill, but somehow the proportions of his torso were the same as a normal person's. Like just his legs were 12 feet long, or he was standing on a ladder. He slowly turned his head to me and stared at me, except he did not have a face. It is not that there were no features and it was just skin or anything. It was that under the hood of his jacket there was just shadow. His face should have been lit up from the light coming from my room, but there was nothing there. I could even faintly see the back of the hood through the darkness. Even though I could not see his eyes, I could feel them staring straight into mine, and it felt like he had crawled into my skin. My whole body felt wrong, like he had poured the shadows directly into me. He raised his completely white hand, he did not even have fingernails, and made the shh gesture where his mouth should be. And then he turned around and disappeared. He did not fade or anything. He was just gone like he had never been there. All these years I thought it was a recurring bad dream or just my infamous imagination. I had convinced myself he was part of a story I wrote or maybe a book I had read. But then a month ago he came back. I am 20 years old living in a third-floor apartment. I had just finished my math studies and I went to close my window since it was well past midnight and the desert where I live gets cold at night, and he was there staring at me. He was just as tall as he was 11 years ago, so his head did not reach my window. He stared. I felt that same molten dread in my whole body. He raised his hand in the same gesture, and then he was gone. The next morning, still convinced I had imagined it, I inspected the bushes below my window. There were 2 columns of broken branches and crushed leaves where he had stood. Story 13. When I was younger, my older cousin lived with us for a bit because she was having behavioral problems at home. My parents had to go at night to pick someone up from the airport, so they left my brother and me with her. My brother and I were both in bed in my room at this point. I think it was a school night, and she was up in the other room doing homework or something. But she finished up, so she comes into my room to lay down with us. But as soon as she opens the door, our house alarm starts going off. She quickly shut the door and came over to me to tell me to be quiet before going back to hold the door closed, since it did not have a lock. My brother, who is older than me by a year, then woke up very confused about what was going on. So the alarm is going off. We are all scared out of our minds, and we cannot even call for help because her phone was taken away, and we were too young to have one. Our only option is to get to one of the landlines, one in the kitchen and one in my parents' bedroom. So we all get ready, and at the same time, we all run to my parents' room and lock their door. My cousin checks their bathroom and closet to make sure no one is hiding in there before calling my parents to let them know what is happening. They say they are only 2 minutes away, so do not worry. But let me tell you, those were the worst 2 minutes of my life. After all is said and done, we find out through the alarm company that the window in my parents' room is what tripped the alarm. And that is the room we moved to. To this day, my parents are convinced she was just trying to sneak in a boyfriend or something, but I am certain someone was trying to enter the place or worse, and got scared off by the alarm because of how completely terrified my cousin looked. Story 14. Boyfriend and I went backpacking in the mountains. I had been camping before, but only car camping, and did not have to carry my bag for long, if at all, so this was my first time actually backpacking. After getting lost trying to find a parking lot, the map swore was there, but actually was not. We drove around the mountain and finally found a parking lot at the top. We had planned to walk down the mountain, camp, and then walk back up the following day. About an hour in, it is maybe 6 p.m., and we come across this guy sitting off to the side of the trail, cooking in a cheap gas stove. He asks if we know where we are at and if we can point him in the direction of a certain place on the mountain, and says he was parked there. He continues talking about how he had a friend drop him off who was going to pick him up at point A, and then changed the story to he was parked at point B, and then said the friend who dropped him off went to hike somewhere else, and another friend who had the map turned back at point C to wait in the car. We finally bid this dude good luck and continue down this trail. The trail is poorly marked and does not correspond with the map we found online. We could not get an actual map because the park office was closed due to asbestos. So we are really confused when we come to a horse trail with no markings to tell us if we are still on the right path. We decide to go down the trail and see if we can find a place to camp for the night and find our way out in the morning. Both sides of the trail are lined with barbed wire, preventing us from being able to camp there. Eventually, we run into a huge puddle in the middle of the trail. We decide to turn back and go back to part of the trail before it turns into a horse trail so that we can camp there for the night because it was really dark and we were tired. About 20 feet behind us was the man from earlier. He talked to us again, and through the conversation, we learned he had heavy narcotics, including fentanyl, and another one I do not remember the name of. By this time, there are so many red flags changing story. Following us, fentanyl. So we take off, deciding to go back to the car and just drive home. We live 4 hours away, and we are about 6 miles from the car. So we take off up the trail as fast as we could. I got severely dehydrated on the way and was struggling. We had plenty of water, but it was very hot summertime in the good old South, and we were practically running up the mountain. Eventually, I started hallucinating, thinking I was vomiting blood red Gatorade or there was blood coming from my shoes sweat. And there may or may not have been a bear somewhere nearby, but that could have been a hallucination too. We ended up doing the full 6 miles up the mountain in 2 hours. We reached the parking lot, and that is when I gave up. I decided to wait on a bench while my boyfriend got the car. The parking lot was curved, so we were out of sight of each other. He finally came back down to me with the car and helped me in. We found a gas station to sleep at for a little while before heading back home. Story 15. When I was in my early 20s, my then boyfriend and I lived in an old house that had since been turned into 4 apartments. We were one of 2 on the top floor. Our apartment was the only one with access to the attic of the house. That door was in our bathroom but was painted and sealed shut, we assumed because the landlord did not want anyone up there. Naturally, we got it open and went up to check it out. Nothing out of the ordinary, just an empty, dusty attic. We had many odd occurrences in the year and a half we lived there. The scariest for me was one night I came home after closing at my job, so about 1 a.m. I arrived home and was home alone, changed and did a few things, and headed to the bathroom before bed. As I am on the toilet, something slams into that door enough to shake it in its frame. I do not think I have ever moved that fast in my life. Jumped up and ran out of the room without even pulling my pants up. Got redressed and headed to my parents' where I spent the night. The next day, my dad and I go back after some calming down, thinking maybe an animal got in there somehow. We pry the door back open and go up to check it out. Nothing there, nothing to explain what it might have been, and had there been an animal or something, we would have seen tracks, and the floor was covered in dust that was undisturbed. We used to hear what sounded like dragging sounds and odd things a lot in that house. I tried to research the address to see what I could find out about the history of the house, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Story 16. My best friend and I lived together in a 2-bedroom apartment my senior year of college. We only had one key to our unit's mailbox, so we always left it on a little table right by the front door. A few months into living there, the key went missing. My roomie swears she remembers seeing the key on the table that day before leaving the house. She had an important piece of mail coming later that day that she wanted to make sure she got. But when she came back from class, it was missing. We looked around the house for a few days, realized it was not turning up, and asked our landlord for a new key. We were confused about how it could just disappear, but just accepted that one of us had probably misplaced it or accidentally taken it out of the apartment. A few weeks after losing the first key, we had a friend over for brunch, and she was putting some cinnamon rolls in the oven. All of a sudden, she asked, "Why is there a key in your oven?" Balanced perfectly across 2 wires on the middle oven rack, in the center of the rack was our old mail key. There is no way it could have fallen into this position. It had to be placed carefully there by someone. We had just made a frozen pizza on the same rack the night before, and it had not been there. And we had not left the apartment between making the pizza the night before and making the cinnamon rolls the next morning. I still cannot think of a plausible explanation to that one, except that my roommate was just messing with me, but seeing her face that day, I know she was not. Story 17. I am not one for believing in ghosts, but there was something in college that could not have been just a coincidence. The dorm room that I stayed at my second semester of sophomore year was the singles dorm room. It was one of the few dorms where you could room by yourself, but they were really tiny, like only a twin bed could fit in there. Well, one day, when I was walking back to my room, there were these guys outside their own rooms. One of the guys was pretty shook up, and I overheard him saying that stuff kept falling off his shelves and that things were being slightly rearranged. I did not think too much of it from then on, at least not until the following year. The year after, I was hanging out with one of my friends when he said he needed to pick something up from his room. So we went to his room, and I realized that it was the same room the guy in the previous year stayed at. Before I could say anything, he told me that the room really freaked him out. He said that he would be in bed with his girlfriend when all of a sudden he would hear a lady whispering, "Levantate," which is get up in Spanish. He would mostly just hear gibberish from what I remember, and maybe something would be misplaced. It did not help when I told him about the previous person there, and there is no way that the two of them knew about each other, and yet things happened in the same small room. What makes it creepier is that supposedly the dorm room housed the clergy. This was a Catholic university, so make of it what you will. But this is the only instance that I cannot logically explain. There were a few other instances that freaked me out at this school, but this one took the cake. Story 18. When I was a kid, I often dreamed about future events. Nothing big, nothing specific. So I never actually believed that I would be able to see the future, but I would bring it up in conversations here and there. It happened one last time, and then never again. I had a dream that I was walking home to my mother after visiting my father's. I had to walk through a really creepy Halloweenish district, which does not exist in reality. I liked it because I love Halloween and stopped at a shop window to look at the bags and clothes. Suddenly, someone greets me from above and introduced himself as Mr. Tom. I raise my head and I see a guy dressed in a black suit and top hat, long black wavy hair, black around the eyes, face painted white. He has a monkey tail and fur on his hands and toes. He is sitting on a flagpole, looking down on me and laughing, loudly saying, come in, little girl. Do not hesitate. Do not be shy and take the chance. Come in and see." And something made me walk in, even if I am very suspicious. The door closes behind me and the lights went out. I can only feel grass around me and the air starts to get cold and windy. I hear laughter. I hear monkeys. I hear big cats. Suddenly, a flash of light appears in front of me, and another guy with suit and top hat appears in the grassy area filled with light. He has short blonde hair. He is telling me to not be afraid but to have fun, and I am trying to talk and explain that I am a little scared and confused, but no sound comes out of my mouth. The light starts to get brighter, and I see lots of creepy clown faces and tigers jumping around. Monkeys screaming and laughing, and I am getting dizzy. Everything turns around me and I black out just to wake up in my bed. I went to school that day, totally forgot about that dream. I went to lunch, got my dessert, and was shocked when I looked closer at it. It was a Mr. Tom candy bar I have never seen in my life before. I have never known about the existence of it. Please Google it and look at the packaging. There are clowns and monkeys and tigers on it. To this day, I guess I actually might have seen it somewhere, but it still creeps me out that we got it as dessert the next day at school. What a coincidence. I thought Mr. Tom was coming to get me and was scared to sleep for at least a week. Story 19. In 2014, I was living in Southern California in a 2-bedroom apartment that was on the 2nd floor. Both my husband and I are Marines, but he was out on a boat for a few weeks, so I was home alone with our 2 cats. One night at around 1 a.m., I am woken by my cats doing that scared cat noise. You know, that high-pitched scream that is just unsettling. I open my eyes and look to the foot of my bed where my cats sleep. They are both leaned to the right of the bed and hissing towards the left of the bed. I follow their eyes and see this enormous shadowy figure, kind of just lurking at the corner of my bed. This freaks me out, and I immediately hop out of bed on the far side, away from whatever that is. It takes me less than a second to leap out of bed, but when I turn to fight, it is gone. My cats are now in my bedroom doorway, searching for it. I work up the courage to go investigate and discover that whatever was in my home is now gone. Needless to say, I did not go back to sleep that night, and my cats stood guard at my bedroom door for the next few nights. Now the plausible explanation. I kept the balcony door slightly open for my cats to go use their litter box. It rarely rains in Southern California, and the weather is wonderful 24/7. It very well could have been an animal, but what animal is brave enough to go into a bedroom where they can smell other cats and a human? The shadow itself seemed large, but like it was crouching at the corner of my bed just peeking up. It could have been a human, but I would have heard it run away considering how quick it disappeared. To this day, I have no idea what was in my room, and it freaks me out. Story 20. This did not happen to me, but to my sister and her husband only a few weeks ago. They heard someone ringing their doorbell at like midnight, and it was really urgent sounding. They knew their neighbor had been having some heart problems, and so they were worried something was up with him, and so the husband ran down to open it. But as soon as he opened it, just a small amount too, this random guy, not the neighbor, slams into it, busts his way in and slams my brother-in-law into the wall. My brother-in-law was trying to fight the guy off, and the guy would shove him to the ground and then start to make his way toward the stairs. My sister heard this, saw he was trying to get upstairs where their bedroom and their kids' bedrooms are, and basically snuck up on him with a vase and whacked him with it. Apparently, this guy was not expecting her to be there because it startled him enough that they were able to overpower him and get him outside again. Of course, they locked the door and called the police. The police, though, I guess they figured that because he was outside now and the doors were locked, that it was a lower priority, which is fair, but even so, I am a bit appalled at how long they took to come to their house. Apparently, it was like 45 minutes, and they got there like 5 minutes after he left. But this is the worst part. In my mind, this guy spent that entire time trying to get into their house, rattling the doorknobs, trying different codes on their electronic lock. He would scream at them to let him in, then go quiet and try to break the code, then get all pleasant and try to nicely convince them to let him in, then scream at them some more, and then he would back off and go across the street, but would stand there staring at their upstairs windows, and as soon as the lights went off, he would be back at the door again. For 40 minutes. It sounded like something out of a horror movie. My sister and brother-in-law were especially concerned because he was so insistent to get into their house, which makes it seem not like some random break-in, and because he had tried to get upstairs to where the kids are a few times. It sounded absolutely terrifying, and of course they were especially frustrated because if the cops had gotten there literally a few minutes earlier, they would have caught the guy, and now the chances are slimmer. I am really glad they are all okay, though. Story 21, I was home alone one evening and had gone to sleep for the night. I live with my significant other and 2 indoor cats, but she was out of state traveling for business. I woke up in the middle of the night, was not sure of time, but it was completely dark because my body was freezing cold. I actually like it cool when I sleep and usually have the temperature around 70 degrees or colder since I live in Central Texas. But this was different. I was ice cold but wrapped in blankets. It was middle of summer, so evenings are not cold. When I grabbed my phone to look at the time, it seemed to be off, and I pressed the on button, but it did not turn it on. Since I was half asleep, I shrugged this off. I walked out of my bedroom to go adjust the thermostat and noticed that the cats were not around. This was weird because these furballs are always hanging out in the bed or around the bed. Anyhow, I walked to the thermostat and tried to adjust it, but the power to the thermostat I have a nest was nil, and the power to the house seemed to be off. I peeked out of the upstairs window to see if any of my neighbors were having power issues and noticed that all of their outdoor lights were working just fine. From the time I woke to this moment was probably 1 to 2 minutes maximum. I decide to wander downstairs to grab some water, but am startled when I realize there is a glow of light coming from the first floor. The way my house is situated, I could not see the light until I had approached the stairs. I found this odd because the power seemed to be out just upstairs, which did not make a lot of sense. I started walking down the stairs and began to hear a faint humming noise. The noise had a high pitch to it with arbitrary pulses of low sounds, almost like a muffled weed whacker that someone is throttling at random. As I continue to walk down the stairs, I spot a dark, slowly moving figure in the room with light at the bottom of the stairs. The next step that I take feels like I walked off the side of a cliff or was sucked into the floor. That is really the best way I can explain it, because I do not remember what happened after that moment. I just lost all feeling from my body. My next memory is waking up again to the sound of my phone's alarm. Everything seemed back to normal. I sat there in bed, cats back to being lazy in bed next to me, and tried to think about the 2-minute incident that happened in the middle of the night. I am not a sleepwalker, and I was definitely not dreaming. My security systems app shows the time whenever a door is opened or closed. I realized that my security system was disarmed on the app and that the front door had been opened and closed several times throughout the night. I pulled up my security footage from the exterior cameras and was surprised to learn that there was zero footage from the night. Like the motion sensors reacted to a random car driving by around 10 p.m., and then the next thing is another random car in the morning. So someone or something walked in and out of my front door, but the cameras did not capture any footage. My neighbor across the street has a good security system that points at my house, so I asked if he can review the footage from his cameras. I told him some made-up story about how I thought someone had entered my truck. Anyway, he said it was weird because when he pulled up the footage from that night, his cameras did not record anything. Just a time gap once again. My first thought was that I was sleepwalking and that the memory was a dream, but it just could not have been. When I looked out of the window in the middle of the night, I distinctly recall a red pickup truck parked the wrong direction in front of the neighbor's house. I always notice when cars are parked left wheel to curb because I have gotten a ticket for this in the past. Anyhow, the truck was not there before I went to sleep based on footage, but was there in the morning based on footage. So the truck was there when I saw it in the middle of the night. I definitely woke up in the middle of the night cold as ice, no cats. No working phone or thermostat, saw the truck out of the window, and then got warped by something on the stairs. A couple additional things were different in the house. The security system was disarmed, and I definitely armed it before going to bed. The light was still on downstairs, and that was absolutely off before I went to bed. My whole body smelled like burnt marshmallows. I know this is weird, but it is really how it smelled. And lastly, my 55-gallon fish tank that sits at the bottom of the stairs in the entryway was missing 2/3 of the water. Seriously, where did 40+ gallons of water go? The whole area around the tank was bone dry, and the fish were fine. I think I was mind-messed by some thirsty aliens. Story 22. When I was 18, I was attending university and renting a room in an old house a few blocks off campus. Only one other room in the house was rented, and the girl who lived there spent most nights at her boyfriend's place. I basically had the entire house to myself. I would estimate that it was built sometime between 1910 and 1920 based on the style and neighborhood, but I could be wrong. I do know it was around 100 years old at the time, and the oldest home I have ever had. It was my first time living alone, and since it was such a big empty space, I spent most of my time in my room behind a locked door. It was not super creepy or anything, but at night when I was alone, I tended to avoid leaving my room unless absolutely necessary. It had the same uneasy feeling of turning off the basement light and then running up the stairs as fast as you could in the dark. Not for any real reason, but it made your heart race anyway. Near the end of my first semester, I contracted influenza A. I had been pretty fortunate with my physical health up until then, and it was the sickest I had ever been in my life. I could barely peel myself out of bed to go to the bathroom or to feed myself. I was incredibly weak, my whole body ached, and I was running a very high fever. I actually developed arthritis in my joints as a symptom, which I did not even know was possible. I remember waking up with a puddle of sweat collected in the hollow of my throat at one point. It was absolutely disgusting. A few days into the ordeal, I woke up to find an elderly man sitting by the side of my bed. There was no chair there, but he was very obviously in a seated position. For some reason, I did not react with shock at all. I was completely unafraid. I asked him what he was doing there, and he simply said, "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I must have fallen back asleep because that is all I remember of the visit. This could easily have been a NyQuil-induced dream or a fevered hallucination, but to me it was absolutely real. He was there and he spoke to me, and I felt very comforted by his presence. A few months later, I had a friend of mine from another school come to visit for a weekend. We did some exploring of the house and found a hatch to the basement. It was filled with old tools and hardware, but one thing stood out to me for no apparent reason. On the wall was a medicine cabinet absolutely stuffed with old pill bottles. Regular things like Anacin and other old brand names I had to look up. It also contained many prescription pill bottles that were too faded to read. For some reason, as soon as I saw them, my elderly visitor came to mind. I wondered if maybe he had some experience caring for a sick relative and came to visit me when I was ill, because it was a familiar situation. I did ask the landlord about previous occupants, but they had purchased the house only a few years earlier and did not know much. I suppose I will never know. Story 23. My family and I used to drive to this old village by the sea when we were kids, and we would spend the whole summer there. The village was known for having a lot of abandoned houses due to old owners passing away and them not finding any relatives. The house right next to ours had been totally abandoned since way before we moved there. The door and windows were all boarded up and the house had been untouched for at least 10 years. Anyway, one summer me and my cousins decided it would be fun to break the wooden boards and look in the window to see what the house was like on the inside. We cracked one of the boards enough to be able to see inside, and to this day I will never forget the sight. The window belonged to a bedroom, and with the bedroom door open, you could kind of see like half of the house through the window, and the entire house was spotless, not a speck of dust in place. The beds were made and looked clean and untouched. The ceiling fan was on. There was a prayer carpet on the floor. I come from a Muslim country. Needless to say, we were weirded out, so we go to the security guard that watches our block to ask if anyone has bought the house, and he says the owner passed away a long time ago, and it has not been touched since. One day later, the board was back up, as if we had never been there. Story 24. Back in primary school 3rd grade, we had this 3rd grade camp on our school's rugby field on a Friday night. No tents, though. We all slept in the clubhouse on the field. It was a lit night. We played games, hide and seek, sang songs, and teased the 3rd grade couples. It was an amazing night, till my group of friends and I went out to hide on the other side of the rugby field where the lights were turned off. We had 3 torches, and being 3rd graders, we were already in this spooky, scary vibe. We were planning to go hide in the tree where we spent our breaks during school, but quickly decided otherwise when we saw 2 men. Well, they might have been teenagers. We were short as life itself, and it was dark, only had the dim torchlights that outlined their bodies. We ran back to our clubhouse and told the 3 class teachers who were spending the night with us. All us children were called inside the clubhouse for safety and supervision. The male teacher that was with us took a torch and went to go check if there really were 2 guys there. And if there were, they must have somehow broken into the school, because the only way to get to the field was through the school. We were supposed to close the blinds and all, but I was too curious, so kept peeking under the blind closest to me. To this day, I remember the teacher walking like 40 meters till he was behind a tree. From my angle, I could see him. He was just standing there, like for 2 minutes. He then came back and told the other teachers he saw nothing but that they should call the cops just in case. He was too damn scared to go check it out himself. Well, I feel you, bro. I would have done the same. Anyway, later that night, 2 cops arrived, and a few minutes later, 2 more vans pulled up. We were sent home. Some of the parents were not happy to come get us past 10 p.m., and the children who did not have lifts home went to sleep at the teachers' houses. We were obviously never told what the cops found that night. I have thought of it to go ask those teachers if they are still there. What the cops found, I am 16 now and in high school. The creepy thing was, the Monday when we went to school again, my group and I went to that tree where we saw the 2 men. The tree had lots of cuts in it, clearly by some knife. There were also a few numbers, not phone numbers, written all over the tree, but the sight of a big body-sized hole covered up with sand like sea sand. That bright yellowish color made my group and I decide to not sit there anymore. Story 25. I had gone to a party in the college town nearby with 2 friends who were dating. We had procured a little bit of mushrooms and there was some drinking going on. The female friend and I partook in the mushrooms. Her boyfriend abstained. I ate 3 grams, she ate 1. I end up planted on the couch for 90% of the night, waiting for everything to kick up. There were a few visual disturbances, but even the body high was mostly non-existent. The party is people we do not know, save a few exceptions, and the apartment is too small for how many people are there. This is very likely why I did not feel anything. After the second wave of partygoers came and went, my friends were finally ready to go home. As we get in the car, almost immediately I start to feel high. We had been at the party at least 4 to 5 hours, so I should have been close to sober. The female friend we were with was definitely sober, and her boyfriend had drunk maybe a half a pint of liquor over the entire night, so he was not in driving condition but not drunk. Obviously, she's going to drive us. We take the long way home listening to the explosions in the Sky album, The Earth is Not a Cold Dead Place, seriously moving instrumental post-rock. During the song First Breath After Coma, we reach a long, slow curve in the road. As the song reaches its massive emotional crescendo, everything is building to a satisfying release. Out of nowhere, the car fills with a pure white light. From the corner of my left eye, I saw it coming. Before I could say a word, everything went blank. No thoughts, feelings, or senses, for what felt like minutes. Realistically, it was a second, possibly two. The air was sucked out of the car and my lungs. Suddenly, reality is back. The song has just ended, and all three of us are gasping for air. Briefly, I assumed it was the substances, but all three of us started scrambling to relate what had happened. We started realizing it was the exact same for each of us. She had seen it coming out of the left corner from up in the sky down towards us, as had he. Nobody was on the road with us until we were almost home. I could not possibly explain what we experienced with anything rational. We will bring it up from time to time with each other or tell the story, but we gave up trying to understand it a long time ago. Part of me still wants to believe it was aliens. The other half hopes it was not some crazy religious stuff. Story 26, I have never actually told anyone about this, but when I was around 11, 19 now, my siblings and I were in my room playing Halo. We only had 2 controllers, so we were taking turns, and I was just watching my brother and sister play. My room had a bathroom connected to my sister's room that always paranoid me, so I left the door closed and locked. I noticed that the door was open and went to close it, thinking my brother may have opened it. Then it was my turn, so I started playing. When I finished, I noticed that the door was open again. I told my brother very adamantly, "Keep this door closed, stop opening it." He and my other 2 siblings claimed they did not open it. I closed it again and sat on my bed staring at it, seeing why it was open. All of a sudden, the door opens and I see some cloudy shadow that looks like a person, maybe 5'8", move into the bathroom. I did not say anything and just bolted out of the room into my living room. I refused to go back into that room for about 2 months and just slept on the couch every night. As I said, I never told anyone about this, but I assume my mom sort of knew what had happened, because about a year ago, my mom was telling me about stuff she saw in the house and never mentioned because she did not want to scare us. My dad also had similar experiences in that house, like seeing someone leaning over him when he woke one night. That was the only experience I had there, and now I am a bit skeptical on the paranormal and think it may have been my imagination or maybe air drafts opening the door. Story 27. When I was about 18, I was staying the night at my parents' house to be closer to work for the next day. It was supposed to snow pretty bad that night. I came across some of my childhood toys and games, including my old Ouija board. My parents were not super fond of it, and me being the asshole that I am, started messing with it, asking if there were any ghosts about. After a few minutes, I started talking trash, saying how there is no such thing as ghosts or demons, taunting it and asking for proof if that is even possible. The next morning, my parents were at work by the time I woke up. I get ready and go to leave my bedroom, and the doorknob will not turn. It was not locked and nothing was jammed into the door frame. I try as hard as I can, and it will not budge. It almost feels like something is wedged under the knob. I start to panic and call my parents. My dad, being the eternal pessimist, thinks I am messing with him and just do not want to go to work because of the snow. He calls my mom, who comes home first. Her job was closer, and she cannot turn the knob either. Dad finally shows up, big burly Bob Villa type, and cannot make this thing turn either. At this point, he takes the knob apart because there is no other way to get in. No one can figure out what caused this to happen, but inside there is a chunk of metal about as thick as my pinky finger that looks like it is snapped off from something. He finally sees that it is the bolt that pushes in or extends out when the doorknob is fully turned. He gets this worried look as he does not know how it could have happened. I joke that I guess this was my proof and the ghosts were having a good time at my expense. That was the beginning of many other weird occurrences at that house. Our family moved from the area eventually, and we do not speak of that board anymore. Story 28. I have told this story before on a different post, but I will tell it again for anyone that wants to hear it. I will try to make it short. I was 13 and in a wilderness treatment program for behavioral things. The place was out in the mountains of southern Utah by a place called Joe's Camp. Plenty of weird stuff happened out there, and I have a few stories, but this freaked me out the most, and the physical feeling I got I can still conjure up today. One night we were sitting around the fire telling scary stories, and the topic of Wendigos came up. Some swore up and down that they are real, and one staff member said there were old tales of encounters in the area. We bantered about it for a few minutes, and then being the edgy teen I was, I just blurted out something like, "Forget a Wendigo. I will kill one with my bare hands. Let me see a Wendigo." Later that night when I was asleep, I had this dream. Long story short, I was basically watching this deer in a clearing, and in the dream I felt the worst feeling of doom ever. Suddenly this deer is crushed. I mean obliterated, like I cannot really describe it. It was kind of sucked up under a big rock, and its spinal cord flew out and impaled me. And the feeling I got when it impaled me was the worst, weirdest pain I have ever experienced. The best way to describe it was like a dirty, scraping feeling. I was then in the dream looking at my feet out the end of my tarp tent, and I was ripped out of the tent. I woke up suddenly, and I was sitting up in my sleeping bag outside of my tent, making the strangest noise I have heard. It was like a wheezing screech, like a primal death cry. I do not know how to describe it. I looked around and quickly crawled back to my tent. I wrote it off as a bad dream and did not really speak about it while I was there. I do not know how to plausibly explain it other than a weird dream and sleepwalking, but it definitely jarred me, and when I remember it, I cannot help but still feel really uneasy. Story 29, I was spearfishing at the end of winter, beginning of spring, with my cousin and 2 nephews. There was shin-deep snow in most places, in some areas with only a couple inches. In this time period, the top layer of snow will melt and leave a thin, icy layer after it freezes again. So we are walking along the creek, and one of my nephews says, "Holy sh!" and I walk over to see what he is looking at. It looked like a footprint, only much bigger. So then I said, "Holy sh!" and my cousin and other nephew came to look at it. We checked around and found a few more prints leading from this one into what looked like the creek itself. We did not have a camera, otherwise I would have snapped a million pictures. I should also mention that we had speared a fish before this right through the head and left it in one of our deep footprints. The nephews freaked out after seeing the Bigfoot footprints, and we went to get the fish and leave. When we got back to that area, the fish was gone, and just a bit of blood was left. It was a strange situation, which my mind refuses to believe. On the 3rd of July, people light off fireworks around the lake that my grandparents lived by. We joined in and lit off ours and even sent off one of those sweet lanterns. After our shells and other fireworks were spent, we continued to watch the other ones. While watching, my ex pointed out some weird lights going around in circles. I dismissed it as lanterns like the ones we sent off. 20 minutes go by and these white circles start to appear and fly in weird circular patterns far off in the sky near the horizon line. 30 minutes after this, we start to see orange orbs floating towards us slowly, which is significant because there was a 5 to 10 mile per hour wind blowing away from us, so these things were coming against the wind. They very slowly veered off to the side of us and disappeared over the horizon. My mind also refuses to believe it was anything out of the ordinary. Story 30. I grew up in a really old house. It was nearing 100 years old right before I moved out, and it used to be a post office or something way back in the day. The house is creepy and big, 3 stories, but I was not ever really scared living there or anything, although I did like to scare my friends with all kinds of made-up stories, and they always believed me too. Anyway, the only weird thing that ever happened, well, 2 things actually, was when my parents left over a December holiday, and I had the house all to myself for a week. Me and my friend were bored just sitting outside on the back porch drinking some beers. All the doors are locked except for the one closest to us. It is just a metal frame door fitted with that glass that you can see outside, but from the outside you just see your own reflection like a one-way mirror. Well, while we were just chilling and talking, someone or something bangs on the door so hard I was surprised the glass did not break. My first thought was that my parents came home early and caught me and my friend drinking. We were both underage. We go into the house and there is nobody, and we looked everywhere. About 2 days go by and nothing happened. Now my room was covered in posters like most teens. I wake up the morning and every single one of my posters are taken off the walls and cupboards and lie neatly folded on my chair. There is no one in the house but me, so either I did it while sleepwalking or it was someone else. To this day, I have no idea what happened, and nothing weird ever occurred, just that.